Well, this week we're going to be painting this father and daughter portrait. I absolutely love this one. Hi guys, I'm Michael, portrait artist from Perth, Western Australia. And on this channel, I want to share you my strategies, my techniques, tips and tricks for painting better portraits, still lifes, the occasional landscape as well. I love everything in art and painting. And also I want to share with you how I managed to build a professional art business. So turning from amateur to professional, so you can use some of these ideas in your journey as well. So without further ado, roll the intro and let's paint. Well, welcome to the canvas, and you see I've actually sketched the father and daughter out on here. It's quite a detailed sketch. I'm just bulldog clipping the linen piece. It's 11 by 16, by the way. I normally don't sketch in such detail, but I thought for this demo, it's nice to see what the artist sees. So when I'm visualizing something on the canvas, these are the flows of the brush marks that I'm envisaging making, to create these portraits. Because obviously I'm not going to try and paint hair, I'm not going to try and paint wrinkles, I'm not going to try and paint lips. I'm just going to use basically smudges of values. And I say values rather than color, because as we know, value does all the work, color gets all the credit. But 80% of creating a portrait or a landscape or a still life is going to be in your values, and that's really, really important. That's why you see some portraits and they use some really weird colors in the face, and it still works. It works because the values are what's doing all the work for you. So basically, I'm just going to cut in some background just quickly here, and I've just mixed 40% burnt umber with 60% ultramarine blue to get me that really nice dark color. I've used a more of a concentration in blue in this one because I am going to lighten the value, or the tone, the light and dark of the actual paint. And I'm going to lighten it a little bit as I get closer to the figures. And when I do paint, I'm using a number 5... what is it? I think it's a number 5. Yeah, it's number 5 filbert here. And you see, I like to press the filbert brushes fairly flat against that canvas and let them spring back up. And that's what's giving me the texture. You see, I'm just working my way just around the outsides with the black, and then I'll cut in with a lighter value or lighter shade, whichever terminology you like to use. Artists always say values, and you actually see me now. What I want to do, I'm just showing you quickly how I get my proportions correct. So I just use a proportional divider. I can just check the eyes, make sure I've got this. These are normally the marks I'd put down. I'd just put a couple of little points there, maybe the outer and inner of the eyes. I'm just checking that there. And the nose, I normally like to go from the bridge of the nose. I think you'll see me do that here. Yep, there I go. I'll just check the bridge of the nose to the end of the nose. A few points like that, and you're basically good to go. But as I say, I've done a lot more detail in this particular drawing, just so you can see the flow of where I'm actually going to be making my brush marks. Because this is going to be abstract realism, so we're not going to actually be painting photorealism here. It's basically just going to be smudges of paint. And talking of paint, the colors I'm using are white. I've got brown, which is really, I think of that as dark orange, a blue, a red, and a yellow. And really that's how I do think of my paints and my colors. They're what I call my essential palette. I wonder what they actually are in the tube coming out, and I think these are Winsor and Newton. I usually use Winsor and Newton. Sometimes I use Geneva. I like Geneva paints as well. But I've got a titanium white here, a burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and on the palette I've actually got Pyro Ruben as my red this time. Sometimes use alizarin crimson, and then bismuth yellow, and you can use cad yellow if you like. It just depends on your own personal taste. I think this is what I just call the essential palette. So from here I can just mix any natural colors that I want. I really don't need any other color. You can add what I call convenience colors, and you'll see artists with quite a few ranges of colors on their palettes. And they're just convenience. They're just shortcuts to get to where they want to get to, because they know what their common colors they're using, so they'll just buy a tube of paint that gets them halfway there, and then there's not really a lot of mixing to do to get them to the result that they want. But remember, painting is not about the color. Painting is about the values. The values are doing 80% of the work, and then the colors only doing 20% of the work. And you'll see when I paint, I hold my brush in all different sorts of angles. Sometimes I'll just do a little bit of dabbing. And this number 5, because it's not a small brush, I get a really unclean edge. I guess an ugly edge. So I get that what I call the connection that I want. I don't want a separation between the background and the hair in this case. So you see me actually just push and pull, and I'm not after anything really too crisp. I'm just going to outline the hair here, so I've got a kind of a guide. But you'll see that push and that pull, and there's this bristle spring off. It really does leave a nice texture on the surface. And as you saw before, I'm using a photo reference. Now, I say it's a reference because really that's all it is. You don't want to be copying, well, I don't want to be copying the photo verbatim. I just want it to give me the mood. I want it to show me the connection between these two people, so that when I'm painting, I'm trying to paint the connection. I'm trying to paint the connection between the different elements in the painting, and I'm trying to paint the connection between the two people. And that's what I'm thinking of all the time. And I think your brush can really express that. Now, I did have a camera issue there, and unfortunately I missed painting her hair. But here we go. I'm going to paint the dad's hair now. And you'll now see what I mean about just pushing this brush in there and smudges of paint. This is all I'm doing, and I'm using the values that I pre-mixed. If we have a quick look at the palette here, you can see that I've mixed actually rows of values, not rows of colors. Some people say I mix rows of colors. Well, you're going to have different color groups within your painting, but within that, it is really advantageous. A lot of professionals will do this. They'll pre-mix a row of values for you, or for themselves, I should say, so that they're not having to think when they paint. And there's an old thing, with some of the greats. They'll say how surprised they are, like with Sargent, how much time he actually spent on his palette. Amateurs tend to want to just dive straight in, put some color down, and it's all exciting, it's all fun, and hey, it's great doing that. But professionals tend to spend more time on their palette than what they will on the board. I can tell you now, I probably spend 2/3 of the painting time on the palette rather than on the actual painting itself, and that is getting my values, making a whole chain of values, making sure I've got those. So if there's a different color group coming up, I will get something to work from. And the other thing is, I'm not really worried about mistakes. Now, you'll see I'm starting from the outside of the hair and coming down, and that's actually opposite to how hair grows. But remember, I'm not painting hair. I'm only painting smudges of tone. I know what should go in there. The value needs to go in there, and I'm just putting those marks. So I really don't care whether I start from the inside or the outside. And the technique I'm going to use for painting these portraits, as you're probably guessing, I'm not painting it as a traditional, let's start with the overall, let's just block everything in and then start cutting back, like a sculptor would cut back. I'm actually going to paint this as if we were going to paint a still life. If you've never painted a portrait before, or you're struggling with painting portraits, forget likeness, forget all that. Just get a nice sketch down. It doesn't matter whether you use a proportional divider to get it down, if you freehand your sketch, whether you want to trace it, whether you want to use a projector. I've seen the experts use projectors. I saw one particular artist use a projector and he got absolutely slammed on social media. I'm thinking the only people complaining are the amateurs, because professionals will use whatever is at their fingertips to get what they want on onto the canvas. So this was done with a proportional divider. Then I just went over and just put a little, as you can see, just those shape marks in basically. So you get it down however you like. But this is an interesting way, a different way of painting a portrait, and there's all sorts of ways. But I thought this would be an interesting way. Let's paint it if we're doing a still life. So we're going to treat each thing as an object. So the hair is an object. So you see I've cut in the background, which was normally doing a still life when we do one of them. We will do a still life, and I'll just show you. Still lifes are great because they actually loosen you up in the painting process, because you're not worried about, is it going to look like the person? No one's going to see your still life. No one's going to know if the jar is actually a replica of the jar that you had in front of you. No one's going to be picking up, oh look, that handle's not quite, not like an ear or an eye or anything like that. So still lifes loosen you up, and the more still lifes you do, and then bring that attitude and that movement and that brush strokes across to your portraits, you'll be amazed at what it does. So you see here, I literally have not painted here. Now we're pretty close in on this, and I'm even closer. I'm actually in front of the camera, so it actually looks harder for me to see when I'm painting. So I'm really not thinking about here. I'm going, I need a bit of light there. I need a higher value there. I'll just flick it in because I understand hair does move. So I'm actually not trying to paint what I see. I'm looking at what is there and saying, where are the movements? And that's why I did all those lines for you. So I virtually, when I look at the hair, I see that movement in the hair, and then that's all I want to do. And you see my brush just going, that's what I'm doing, is just giving it a wipe, and I go back onto the palette, and I'll pick up a different value, and I'm not worried if it goes off. Remember, you can cut back in. This is oil paint, and this is wet in wet technique. So we can just correct. It really doesn't matter. What I want to do is get the layers of the values there, and those layers of the values are what are going to cause the illusion or create the illusion of hair on this actual painting. So the photo is a reference. The photo shows you the movements. It shows you the connection between the two hair. It shows you the connection of the hair into the forehead. And it shows you the connection between the viewer and what is the viewer seeing? What is the viewer feeling? And, I can see some little tufts coming off there. I can see little tufts coming down here. And then you'll see I use the edge of this filbert brush just to get lines rather than flat. So by moving the brush around, you can create different textures, different marks. I like using the edge to get the straight lines. I like using the flats to get the borders. I like to push that brush onto the canvas, and then we're getting even closer. I'm glad it stayed in focus for you guys. And you can see I'm just dabbing, but I'm putting more and more values. I'm putting layers of values because I know it's the values that are going to do the work, not the actual color. And if you ask me, is this the gentleman's exact hair color? It won't matter. It's pretty close, but it is an exact match. If I'm honest, probably not. But when people see it from a distance, they'll just say, it's his hair. It's got the movement of his hair. It's got the styling of his hair. It's got that tuftiness about it that this gentleman actually has. And by layering the values on like I'm doing, it really creates the depth. So in a landscape, you'll often hear landscape artists, that they put less color. They'll desaturate their colors in the background, and then increase the colors. And they'll always make sure that the lightest lights and the darkest darks are right in the foreground as compared to the background. The background's always lighter. That is what we're doing here. We're bringing anything we want forward, we're making darker or lighter. So in a value perspective, the things that I want to come forward, I've actually made a little bit lighter. And now as we step back, you start to get the illusion that there's actually hair there. This beard, I wouldn't normally have painted at this stage, but I wanted to know the connection between the value range and the color range in this, to see what was happening between his beard and her face, in this lower part of her face. And I didn't want to get down to the lower part of her face and be left with just this blank space down there and no reference for myself. I wanted to see the feeling and the connection, that mustache is coming across the beard. So I thought I'll just roughly, and I do come back to the beard, but I just roughly just block it in. Let's get some textures down there. Let's get some values down there. It's nowhere near perfect. It's nowhere near done. So now here we go. Now I'm going to treat her forehead as an object. I know. So we're going to paint her forehead as if it's object all by itself. Now I've drawn some lines in there. You can see what I've done with the lines, because we know that the center is going to be lighter than the outside. We know that underneath that hairline we're going to have a little bit of darkness, but we also know there's going to be lots of tonal shifts. There's going to be lots of value shifts going on, and that is what I'm doing here. So I'm not just trying to blank something in and paint one. If I can give you one tip for a portrait, or even for anything in that matter, the more value shifts you can get into an object, the more real it will look. No, I don't do blendy, I'm not blending at all. And you'll see as we go on, some of it looks like, oh my goodness, he's not blended that. That's really rough. But as the painting comes together, those edges just seem to meld into each other. And it's a technique that you see from some of the old masters. I liken it to this, that once you start looking at a portrait, if it's smooth, your eyes will just slide straight off it. It's got nothing to grip onto, nothing to keep you there, nothing to get the interest, nothing to go, oh, wow, there's no shapes, there's no contours. So if you paint like this, what you got to do is, and what I recommend is, as you're starting your portrait, it's terrible when you're close up. It's really hard to do, but you're trying not to do blendy. You're trying not to do smooth. What I want to do is form edges. I want to form grippy parts, as I call it, if that is a word, for my eyes to grip onto. So my eyes flicking across are going to get stopped in milliseconds. Obviously in milliseconds, because your eyes work really, really quickly. But don't you worry, your eyes are going to blend this together for you, or the viewer's eyes are going to blend it together for them. You don't have to do the blending. You have to create something for their eyes to grip. So I call it gripping. So the eyes are going to grip onto things. It's going to bump into all these little ridges, all these little marks, all these different shifts in tonal value. And it's going to start, and it has to work. It has to start piecing this together, and it will. It will do it all by itself. This is how our brains are wired. That's why, if you look at clouds and say, I can see a rabbit in the cloud, I can see this in the cloud. Your eyes and your brain are working to try and create things all the time. Once it knows this is meant to be a person, guess what it's doing? It's finishing off all that work, but it causes the eyes to pause in those tiny milliseconds, and that's what attracts them to it. And don't worry about mistakes. It's painted by a human being, so people expect it to be mistakes in your painting. That's what attracts people to it. It's got a mistake in it. It's like it's painted by a human. That's what makes it exciting. It makes it interesting. It's why did they do that? Why did they put that there? And you can see as we paint this forehead as an individual object and I start putting values, there are going to be stages where you're going to be going, I want to go back and fix. I want to start playing with this a little bit more. Oh, the colors are wrong. The values are wrong. And what I'm going to say, this is one of the biggest techniques that I learned when we're doing, and this is alla prima, so it's just wet in wet. And one of the biggest techniques I can share with you for this is just put your color and your value into the area. So I don't talk about temperature, by the way, and chroma and all that stuff. I'm pretty basic. I know if I've got the color right and I've got the value right, that's basically all I need, And if I've got a photograph to work from, it's easy because I can just dab the paint straight on the photograph and go, yep, it's the right color and it's the right value and it's the right shade. I can squint. And what I do is I dab it onto a photo and I squint at it. If the paint disappears and like blends into the paint underneath or the picture underneath, then we know we got the right value, and then we just match the color. And we can talk about color mixing, and I do spend a lot of time color mixing. But all I'm doing now is I've just treated the forehead as an individual object. It's now finished. Once it's finished, I can just go and tap that paint down a little bit. Anything that I don't like or need a little bit more value shift in somewhere, and you'll see just that brush, just putting those marks on. Try not to get too blendy, but that's how I've done it. Now I'm going to treat the nose as an object. So you see, I'm looking at the nose on the right, and I'm trying to look for where the curves and where the shadows, and we know that how a nose is meant to look. We know it's going to have darker edges, and it's going to have lighter down the center. So we're going to paint what we know as well as what we see. We've got that shadow coming in from the eye socket there. So we know it's a shadow. So let's just put a shadow in there. Now, when you first do this, you may be saying, oh my goodness, that color looks wrong. Let's not worry about that. Let's just paint what we see and also combine that with what we know. Put the paint down and move on. The paint is now down. Now I need to look for another spot of canvas that doesn't have any paint on it and put some paint there. I got to find what it actually needs to be. What's the color and what's the value. I'm really looking at value more than color. This is why I say, you can see portraits done by lots of people, and they put all these colors and they're absolutely magical. You look at them and go, wow, how do they do that? And it's because they get the values right. So once you get the values right and you know that you're painting value more than color, you're kind of going, I can get away with a lot. I can let my creative instincts come out and do what I want to do. And you see what I'm doing now? I'm just shifting. I need to get these eye socket curves. I'm treating them as an object. Actually, I might even put the eyebrows in, I think. Yeah, here I go. I put the eyebrows in. And again, I use a very dabby stroke for eyebrows. I want to pull the paint to give some texture to the eyebrows, because I'm certainly not going to be painting hairs in eyebrows. You zoom in on any of my portraits and you'll just go, it's just a smudge of paint. There's no hair there. No, we're going to create the illusion because I'm just going to dab so I get some texture. I do want texture, but I don't want to paint hair. So this is a really dark, this is a burnt umber again mixed with ultramarine blue. And I'll use a very similar technique of once I've got the eyebrow in to where I want it, the darkness underneath, then I'll come on top with a lighter version of that mix. I'll just put a little bit more titanium white into that mix, just a really tiny bit, because titanium white is just so strong. And then I'll dab that onto the edges. Eyebrows, we know that as our eyebrows come right to that thicker edge, just above the eye there, they're a little bit thinner just where they start to form. So we'll create that illusion. We'll just dab a little bit of lighter version of that color just there. So it gives the illusion that we've actually painted thinner hair, and we've actually done nothing. We've just put another smudge of paint down there to give the illusion. And then we'll put a couple of little smudges of lighter color through the eyebrow as well. And that'll give it its dimension. And there you go. You see me just flick a little bit of that lighter color through there as well. And then I'm coming down and going, where's another piece of canvas that I haven't covered yet? And what colors do I need to put in there? And what value? And as I paint this, it does look like it's crazy. You're kind of going, these colors look way, way off. Look at the stark difference. Really hard to do. Don't worry about it. Just move on. One thing I'd say, when a lot of people said, well, when you started your portrait career, and a lot of people saying, well, because you can judge paintings. Some people like what you do. Some people don't like what you do. I just find it just totally irrelevant. There's going to be enough people like what you do for you to create a business on it. I think the first thing is, it's, if you're going to be a professional, you really have to, I come from the business, just to give you a bit of background. So I come from a business background. I did art as therapy, as a bit of relaxation from doing business and building businesses from scratch and buying businesses and turning them around and selling companies and doing all that corporate consultancy stuff. So I kind of come from that background rather than an art background trying to learn business. I've already learnt the business, and then my art I was learning along the way. And so a lot of people say, well, where do you actually start as a professional? And it's the same with any business, and that is you've got to have a vision for yourself. And the vision is your vision. So a lot of people start thinking about the customers, about the clients. And this really works well for artists, because artists paint what they want to paint. They paint from their soul, from their feelings. And so you can have a look at your art and you can say, what is my dream? What would be my dream as an artist? And this becomes your purpose. So, and your vision and your values all wrap into this. And if you can get this down, it will guide you in how you're going to present your work. It will guide you in how you're going to do your social media platform stuff. We'll have to talk about that as well. It'll guide you in how you're going to do your website, because your website is your home. It's like someone walking into your house. They should feel your personality in your house. Otherwise, you might as well just get an exterior decorator to come in, decorate it for you, and you just move in, and it's nothing of you in there. So people often say to me, so what did you set your target for? What were you looking for? And I said, well, if I'm going to be professional, wouldn't it be wonderful? And I just let myself daydream. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have one of my pieces auctioned at, like one of the big auction houses, like Sotheby's or something like that, or get my work into some prestigious institution, So I look at that and go, yeah, I'd love that. I'm in Australia, and as a portrait, I love doing portraits. One of our ultimate prizes is called the Archibald. So I goes, I'd love to get a piece, have a client, and put them into the Archibald and have a crack at something like that. So this, I know it sounds funny, but, artists, we've got a dream. You've got to go for things, and this is the business side of the art. But what that did, I started looking at the major art houses and the major art galleries of how they like things presented and how they like, not talking about your art style now, but how they like you to conduct yourself, all these unwritten rules. What do they want in an artist statement, and then how do they like to visit your website? What are they looking for, How would they like if you met them to give them your business card? Is your business card going to speak to them that you're a professional artist or the amateur? And then, so by aiming at that, that's what I went for. That started my journey. Now, I started my career without a website, without a TikTok, without a YouTube. I mean, this is the very first YouTube channel I'm doing right now, the very first YouTube video I'm doing for you guys. And I'd built a career without any of that. And a lot of people say, oh my goodness, you need a website, you need a TikTok, you need YouTube, you need this, you need that. No, you don't. You need you and your art, and then some pretty basic understandings of what it is you're aiming for your purpose, your desire, what you actually want to do. And yours is going to obviously be different than mine. And then from there, you can then branch out and say, okay, so these are the people and this is who I want to serve. So then from my vision, what I want to, with me, give things to people that they can connect with. So mine's all about connection. I want when, I'll give you an example. So this is a father and daughter. So my linen here, when I finish painting on this linen canvas, I'll let it dry. Then I will varnish it. And when it's dry, I will actually mount this onto a board before I frame it. And I like to use a white matte board as a border, and then a very simple black frame. I just like it. If clients want to change it, they can change it later. But the key is to mount this linen onto a board, because this is a gift. This is about connection. This isn't about me. This is about them. And I want the father, in this case, to, with a Sharpie, to turn the painting around and on the back, on the board, write a message to his daughter, something he would like for her to always know. A piece of advice from him, a statement from him to her. So the whole item here becomes more than just the portrait. In years ago, everyone passes away, he's no longer be here, but she is, and she's going to have this portrait of these two together, but something special is on the back, and that's what he said to her. His little statement, his little gift to her, and that's going to carry a massive amount of weight, and I really believe connects the portrait more to this lady than anything that I could possibly do. I don't even get my ego involved in these things. My job is just to capture it for them so they can have it for themselves. And you can imagine with her children or her partner and then the grandchildren, and this is just going to go on and on. And I think it adds real value. Just quickly, as you see, I'm just painting around the eye here. And you'll see I'm just doing very, very small value shifts. As I always say, the more value shifts you can get into your painting, the more realistic it's going to be. So this is a couple. So if I was doing a corporate portrait, and I do quite a few for corporate boardrooms and so forth, same strategy. I do like to mount my linen onto boards, even when they get even a larger size, because I want, like in this case, a CEO that I got them to write their almost their mantra, I suppose, of what they felt of business, or what they wanted to see for this business, or what their philosophy was on business. And they wrote that on the back, and then we took a photograph of that. And when they put the portrait of her up in the boardroom, sitting alongside was a little photograph of what is actually written on the back, and the plaque, the little white plaque that tells you who she is and a little bit of detail about the painting, what size it is and what medium it's painted in. And underneath it was her name, and then typed in black, very, very simple font, we use just Times New Roman, was her statement also. So it's not just walk into a boardroom and, oh, that's a nice painting of the CEO. It's, yes, this is our CEO, and that's her philosophy. And you can go and look at her and read what she said and cause more of a connection between you and the person. This is my idea of connection, which I'm really, really big on for portraits. So how am I going to connect this portrait to the viewer who may not know the person? And how am I going to connect the portrait when it is a couple having an anniversary painting done, or it's grandparents with grandchildren, or it's, a father and daughter like this one? So I'm always looking for what can I add to it. And the statements was what I came up with, because it's nothing like hearing their voice, seeing them and then hearing their voice at the same time. And that's what the message is on the back of these paintings is all about. And I think that gives you real connection. So that is what I'm on about there. There is another thing if you're going to go professional. You see and I've pre-mixed colors here, by the way, and I've pre-mixed this color, and I've then done a whole range of tonal values, which is allowing me to just then fill the gaps. And by the way, you can just see what I'm doing. All I am doing is going, okay, I've laid that in there. Let me move on. Where's a piece that I haven't filled in yet? Where is there a gap that I haven't filled in? Where's a bit of bare canvas? And it's a burnt umber wash. And I think did I tell you it was a burnt umber wash on the back? Burnt umber and a bit of titanium white, just washed over the back there and let to dry. I'm just looking for those gaps. So going professional is interesting because it's a little bit different than just painting, for fun. I used to paint, as I said, I was in business, so I painted to get rid of stress. But now I paint professionally, so it's a full-time job. I've got to plan my day. I've actually got to plan the portraits that I'm going to be doing. So I always like to have a portrait that I'm working on, or a still life. I do quite a few still lifes for clients. So I like to have one always on the canvas that I'm painting. I always like to have one that I say that I'm starting. So I might do a few sketches of it, and I'm searching for the connection. How do I get the connection here in this painting? Then I've got one that is already ready to go. Maybe I've done some photographs. Maybe I've set up some still lifes and taken a series of shots, and I've looked at the pictures and gone, I really like this one here. And then I'm always looking for the future. So I'm always looking at trying to get an idea is once these are done, what am I going to be painting after I've done this? So I've got this chain of about 4 paintings in my mind at the same time coming through. And you can see now as I'm painting this eye, and it probably doesn't look like an eye or anything like an eye at the moment. Again, I'm just looking for value shifts. So I'm actually knowing that underneath the eye, we tend to have those little pinky bits, especially in the ladies. I tend to know that, in the corner there's going to be a little highlight. Oh, you just see me just put that in there now. So I'm not just painting what I see, I'm actually painting what I know. And I don't think this little highlight actually shows up in the photograph. Photographs are great, but they're not perfect. So you've got to paint what you know also. Now, when I first put that in, I just want to make a point. I tend to put that in, and then if you were just to look at that by itself, you might say, well, that's far too bright. We need to dull that down. It needs smudging in a little bit more. Don't do that. Just pop it in place. It's meant to be there. Just trust the process. And then the eye, all I'm looking for is her shape. I'm looking for the shape of her eye because she's actually smiling. So her eyes actually don't quite line up straight. And that's probably throwing me out a little bit here. One is slightly higher than the other. Normally you get the eyes dead level, but because she's moved her head slightly. And so it's taking me a little bit to work that eye out, and I keep glancing at the other one. I normally wouldn't draw it in. I normally just have a couple of marks, but it's actually good. It's a good exercise, and then I will just pop the bottom one in. So what I would say about the art business is, and any piece of art really, I start as I intend to finish. So in this piece, I said to you I was going to paint it like a still life, and I was going to start as I intended to finish, and I was going to paint the forehead as an item. I was going to paint the nose as an item. I'm now going to paint this one eye as an item. I'm not trying to do the whole thing and then sculpt it out. You see, you can put your center line down and then you split it into thirds, a third for the eye, then you come down, halfway, you put the eye line in, and then you'll come down half between the eye line and the bottom of the chin and put another line, and that will give you the bottom of the nose. And then roughly halfway between the nose and the chin, you put another line, and that'll give you the mouth. And you can start plotting features, and as you get them roughly put in, then you can start cutting and putting more detail in. I'm not actually doing it this way. I'm actually proving to you that you can actually paint a portrait as a still life, and if you paint them this way, it can actually fast track your success. Because I'm not actually worried now. I'm not stepping back every 5 minutes going, does it look like her? Because obviously it doesn't. There's nothing to look at the moment. All I'm doing is going, that value, and by the way, this is ultramarine blue, mixed with, it's basically titanium white with a dash of ultramarine blue, and then a little bit of burnt umber, because I want it bluey, but I obviously don't want bright blue in there. So, and you'll notice I've made one side darker. So we always know that when we look at an eye, if you look at somebody's eyes, they're not perfect, are they? There's, one side a bit lighter, the other side a bit slightly darker. Sometimes they've got a bit of bloodshot going on in there, some veiny lines going on in there. And so I just made them different values. Again, it's the values. What again I'm looking for is for the eyes, something for the eyes to grip on. So as the eyes go and look at that, because there's a couple of different values happening, the eyes have got something to grip, something to make, something to, work with, and it makes it look more real to them. The more you can make somebody's eyes work to turn something that is just smudges of paint into reality, I often think the better off you are. Now, I'm just putting that black line around the eye. You'll notice most of it will disappear. Now, the other thing is the eye is curved, yeah, so it's going to be darker at the top. So we'll just, and you see that dabbing motion. What I'm trying to do is put a bit of vibrancy into the eye. So by dabbing it and I'm pulling the paint up, I'm not just getting a simple flat surface, but I don't have to use any special thick paint either. Your oil paint will naturally come up. Here we go a little bit lighter around the bottom here. And you see that flick, and I'm trying to flick my brush. I'm trying to vibrate the brush as it goes on there, hoping that it will give me some vibration in the surface of this painted eye that will give it a life. I could just go in there and just get a brush and just paint nice and flat, brush the bristles in, but I won't. The other thing I'll do is I'll never paint a pupil perfectly round. So if you look at this pupil, you're saying, that pupil's not round, Michael. No, it's not. You say, yeah, but people's pupils are round. Yeah, well, I don't want it round. I want it misshapen, and I want, as I put the highlights in, your eyes, as you step back, will do the work. It will round it off for me. I really don't have to worry. I quite often, you look at some of the masters, you look at pool, there's one for a pool table, and you look, when you zoom right in, the pool balls aren't even round. That's where I got it from. But from a distance, you're going, it's round, because your eyes fix it. It's called grip. I call it gripping. I'm sure there's some probably technical term for all of this, but I'm fairly basic. And yeah, so by not having it round, by having two layers of shadow on here, so I'll actually put a darker highlight underneath. So again, ultramarine blue, white with a dash of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and then I'll just add a little bit more titanium white. And so those highlights have actually got two colors or two values on them. A darker value sitting underneath, and then the darker value sitting on top. I wouldn't normally paint eyelashes, but there was something about her eyelashes. I obviously don't want to paint all of them, but I just wanted to put something in there for them. I just really liked them. I thought they just added something. So I just put a couple of little marks to, when you look from a distance, oh, she's got eyelashes. You zoom in and they're not actually there. It was just, again, Michael's just put a couple of smudges of paint. A little bit of shadow line. We know there's a fold. It's not actually in the photograph, you can't see it, but I know there's a fold above that eye, and you know there's a fold above that eye. So this is what I call, painting what you know as well as what you see. And I'm not going back correcting anything. So now I'll start on the second eye, and I'm again going to treat this as a still life object. And I'm saying in still life, you still want to get that vibe. Still life's a funny name, isn't it? Because you paint a still life, but it's not dead. You're trying to always put life into them. Landscapes. You freeze a section of time in landscape, but if you watch any good landscape or you look at them, and it's like it's got a vibrancy to it, got a movement to it. Once again, so I've just fast forwarded this for you, so you've already seen me paint the eye. But once again, if you look carefully, one side's lighter than the other in the white section. The eye's not perfectly round. The pupil's not round, not perfectly round. It's got a couple of highlights. The highlights are again done in a white, ultramarine blue, and then a dash of burnt umber. And then I put that down, and then I've actually just lightened it with a bit more titanium white and just popped that over the top. Very important in highlights that you do actually put 2 or 3, sometimes different values to build up your highlight. Otherwise, they just look a bit fake. So always put a darker, maybe come up, if it was a bit bigger than that highlight, I would actually put 2, 3, sometimes 4 layers of values to get up to my brightest spot, and it'll just give the illusion of depth and make the highlight look real. Again, all I'm doing here is looking for spaces. So there's blank canvas. I need to fill it. What do I need to fill it with? What color? What value? And I say, you're not seeing me on my palette. As I said, I would spend 2/3 of the time on the palette and only 1/3 of my time actually laying this in on this painting. This is an interesting way of doing it. I wanted to do this as my first one. I've done it for a couple of people, and they go, "You can't paint a portrait like you paint a still life." Yes, you can. And that's my intention today, was like challenge the norm and go for it. So many times we see people do big washes, start carving out. And I just wanted to show you that if you take it this way, and the secret is obviously put the value where the value goes, and forget about it, and then put another value next to it. So the idea of forcing yourself, and this is what professionals do, and you'll see a lot of artists, even on YouTube, you'll see a lot of them with pre-mixed colors that they've done, pre-mixed values. You'll see their value chains mixed because they don't want to miss a step. They know if that's darker, they're going to put a next one next to it is only going to be like one or half a step difference, then half a step or one step more. And eventually, and now you can see if we step back, if you look at her forehead, I haven't touched that forehead, but you can see as the picture's starting to evolve, the actual forehead looks normal. But if you really look at it, you can actually see the marks and the grippiness that I've left there for the eyes to grip onto. Her eyes now are starting to have a little bit of a shine to them because now we're getting some other values and a different color contrast underneath. And the blues and the reddy pinks and oranges, they work really nicely together, don't they? I just think that's and she's got grey blue eyes. And later when I paint him, you're going to see the same. He's got grey blue eyes as well. I actually didn't notice it when I first met them, but they've actually got the same colour eyes. So yeah, all I'm doing now, I've got my basic rule. The more value shifts I can put in, the more real it's going to look to the viewer. And once again, I'll put values in, and initially they could look wrong. Remember, we've got the base color of the canvas sinking through or seeping through here, and I don't mind if a bit comes through. But because there's a lot of blank canvas, it'll play tricks with your eyes. You'll be looking at it and going, Michael, that's just the wrong color, or that's just the wrong value. That is too bright, or that's too dark. I'd be in there straight away. What are you doing? But I'm using it, as I said, as a still life, and I'm not really interested in looking at as a whole. I'm just working my way down. Now I'm going to work my way down to the cheek area here. And again, that dabbiness that I'm doing, even though I'm using a smaller brush on this side, and I do that for a reason, this side had a bit of a smoother look to it. So I decided I still wanted the vibrancy. I still wanted that little marks put on there. But I chose to complete this side with a smaller brush. Now, a smaller brush will give you a different look, and I don't care what people say. Oh, you must paint with big brushes. You must have long handles. You must do this. It's like, oh my goodness, you paint how you want. What I'm after is just these little subtle marks on this side of the face, and that little bit of vibrancy that I'm trying to get. And you'll see it. I'm dabbing away and shake that brush. I don't want clean brush strokes. I want to form a surface that's got texture to it that the actual eye can then grip onto. And really that is what I'm on about. So as I was saying before, to be a professional artist, if you had a job, you would go to work 9 till 5 or whatever it is, 8 hours. Maybe you got a casual job, but you're still going to go there for 4 hours, whatever, and do a set number of tasks and have your day organized and know what you're going to be doing that day. And to become a professional artist, people don't like to talk about this bit, but that is what it is. When are you going to get into the studio? What's your schedule? How do you do it? Because you're going to have, your three hats. You're going to be the CEO who's only interested in the money, because that's the business side of it. The artist who wants to create good work and keep learning. Where's your time for learning and improving? Have you set yourself, an hour a day or half an hour a day or a couple of hours a week? What is it you're going to do in that area? And then of course, your marketing. So, and now social media marketing is absolutely huge. But to give you an idea what I did when I very first started, because people said, well, you didn't have any social media, so what did you do? Because I was painting still lifes and portraits. I painted a few still lifes. I had a few family and friends. I really liked that. I'm having a house extension. I'd paint them a picture and they could have it for their house extension, so they really enjoyed that. And then I was painting portraits for family and friends. So then they could have portraits, and of course then I went and got a little bit smarter about the whole thing when I was happy with what I was doing, and people were happy with what I was doing, which is more important, because we're always our worst critics. You know, we paint stuff and then we look back at it and go, oh, I should have done this, oh, I should have done that, I wish I did. We're artists. We can't help ourselves. So it was more important for other people, and then other people were saying, oh, I'd love you to paint my mum, I'd love you to paint me and my grandchild. So I painted, I think, probably 10 or 15 for family, friends, and then you can see now the bigger brush come out. Sorry guys, that's a number 4 filbert. Again, that's still push and pull technique on those bristles to try and get that texture. And then really I'm just going for values in here. And at the moment, some of the colours look wrong because there's nothing against them. The cheek looks too red, and if you just chase your tail. Anyway, back to what I was doing. So then I decided, well, who could I paint for? So I picked my hairdresser, painted a hairdresser that I knew, so she could hang it in a salon. I had a good friend of mine whose wife was opening a beauty salon, so I painted her so she could hang the painting in the foyer of her new salon. And what was happening, people were coming in, oh, that's marvellous, who did that? And the little statements were sitting alongside it, and it looks great, who did that? They'd tell them, give them a card, and before you knew it, the phone was starting to ring and work was starting to come in. Very, very simple techniques. When I did some landscapes, I gave them to some of corporate people that I knew. Obviously, coming from a business world, that was easy for me to go in. But look, you can join business associates yourself and then paint them a painting and gift it to them, because that's part of your marketing. So that's how my portrait career began. I was doing a portrait for a client, and they said, oh, where's your website? I said, I don't have a website. Oh, you need a website? I said, oh, I don't need a website. Yeah, I do quite happily by my little old lonesome self here. What do I want a website for? And they made the actual pertinent comment, the website's not for you. The website is for your clients, so they can actually show their friends and have something to refer them to. And it is one of them business lessons. You always need something to invite somebody to. So I built a very, very simple website. I use Squarespace. I'm not sponsored by Squarespace, by the way. But it just seemed the easiest one to do, and it met all my criteria. Is it perfect? No, because it's breaking one of my rules, and that is that your website is your home. So the moment it looks quite, if you went on it today, after watching this video, you'll see it looks quite sterile. You see my paintings, obviously, in a bit of a corporate written brief, because I was in my corporate mindset when I wrote it. But if you watch it now over the next few months, it is a bit like a home, isn't it? When you first build a new house or you move into a new apartment, it's pretty bland. You put a few pieces around, and over the time, the longer you live there, the more of your own personality will come in. So I think that's my advice on a website, that don't get too excited trying to get it perfect on day one. It's going to be progress more than perfection. What you're doing is you're going, this is my home. I've got some basic stuff in here. Now let me build on that. And I think if you just do a little bit of building each week or each month on your website, start to incorporate more your personality in your website, treat your website as your home, it will start to get better and better and better. Is it the answer to selling? It can be, yes, absolutely. For some people, the website is their go-to and they sell off them. And as your careers progress and you start to become more international as well as just national, then yes, definitely. And for myself, I guess if I'm looking at, the Sotheby's, trying to auction a piece at Sotheby's or get into the Archibald Prize, it's going to become more and more relevant. They're going to go, well, where can we see your work? They don't just want to look at Instagram and TikTok and, Pinterest and YouTube. The professionals will say, well, where's your website? So we can actually see that. Just a little thing on her lips there. It again, you saw me just putting the tones in there, darker tones on the outside, darker tone through the center, the little gap in the middle. I painted, and what I did, I just dabbed a little bit of titanium white across the bottom of the lips and a little bit across the top there, and then smudged it in. So I didn't actually mix that lighter color. I used the red underneath. And I just dabbed with the edge of the brush you didn't see it in the video, but all I did was just dab some of my titanium white across this. There's little dots of it on there. And then I wiped the brush clean. And then using that number 5 filbert, again, one of my favorite sites, I've got a bunch of those things. I just basically smudged the white into the pink. And what it did, it gave me different gradients because obviously the brush is in different pressures and so forth happening. And happy accidents. There we go. And that's how I've done that. Now, this is her leather jacket. And the last thing I'm going to do, as you obviously already know, I'm not going to try and paint leather. I couldn't paint leather to save myself. I'm not a photorealistic painter. And I've got no intention of trying to imitate the surface of the leather. What I'm going to do is use my tonal shifts and then let your brain tell yourself that's a leather jacket. And that's just a little chrome button that is on the collar piece there. And at the moment, it doesn't look like anything, does it? And this is the problem. When you sit there yourself and you're so close, one of the challenges, I think, is we want it to look like something on the first, second, third brushstroke. We block that thing in and look at it and go, it doesn't look like it, and they go to want to fiddle. Don't. Just go, okay, I've blocked that in. Where's another blank piece of canvas that I need to fill in? And that's what you're going to do now. I'm just moving along, and you see the dabby strokes and the pulling and the pushing of the bristles on there. I think I switched to a number 3 filbert now. I've got a bit of a line I want to get in. But yeah, even the line. See, I'm just doing short, jabby strokes. I don't want a continual line going down there. I want it stopping and starting. And what it's doing in each one of those junctions, it's putting texture on them. Thicker, thinner. Every time I push that brush onto that canvas, I'm not a machine. There's no way I'm going to get that each imprint exactly the same as the previous one. So each one of them strokes I'm doing, I know because of my human imperfection, they're going to look different. And that's what I want. I'm going to take advantage of my imperfections to create something that will have that grippy texture on it. So again, this is my burnt umber mix with ultramarine blue to get the dark, and I'll put a little bit of titanium white in here. There's no red in here. This is very blue. The dad's jacket's going to have the red in it, so I didn't want any red in this. Sometimes I'll put a bit of red into this mixture to give it a bit more vibrancy, a bit more life, but I definitely didn't. This mixture here is basically the red that I've got with the yellow to make an orange. And then I put the dark orange in, which is the burnt umber. There's no blue in this mixture. And then I just use a little bit of titanium white if I want to lighten it up. So its base is I first mix the yellow with the red to get myself an orange. Obviously that orange is going to be totally incorrect. And then I'll shift the color. And that's what I've used all through her face. And you can see I've shifted. I've actually put a little bit more red in here. I've put a little bit more yellow. The lighter spots you're seeing is a little bit more yellow going in, a little bit of titanium white. But then to knock the edge off, I'm just using a little bit of burnt umber. Not too much burnt umber. Otherwise, the color gets to be a little bit muddy. And I think that's the advantage of playing on your palette. You can mix your yellow and your red and get your orange, and then you can say, oh, okay, I'll put a little bit more red and see what happens. I'll put a little bit more yellow and see what happens. I like how that tonal shift is happening and the color shifts are happening at the same time. I might put a little bit of burnt umber in there, and then you end up making a mistake and put too much in. Don't worry, I do the same. And it's like, oh, that's terrible now. That just looks like mud. Oh, well, scrape that off, start again. And I think that's part of the fun. I think what you can't lose, even when you're turning professional, is the playfulness, the experimenting. I like what I've got. Let me take some of that pile of paint, put it across here. Let me put a little bit more yellow in that and see what it does to it. Oh, look at that. Happy accidents. Oh, and then you'll realize if you put a little bit of blue in, you'll get some other shifts. If you put a bit of brown in, or the burnt umber, which is really a dark orange. If you think of burnt umber as a dark orange, what you're trying to do is use that to dirty the paint up, because you don't want pure color. The skins just aren't pure color anyway. Again, you'll see I'm just dabbing around. We know she has a throat. We know there's shadows. I can look at her neck, and I don't have to make it perfect. All I've got to do is put some highlights through there and some darker shapes in roughly the shape of where her neck would be twisted. Because if you have a look at that, her shoulders are on. You can see she's twisted her neck and her face over to Dad, So you're going, oh, yeah, so I would see the muscles down the side there. I haven't really painted muscles, so I've just put some smudges of lighter value down there for your eyes to grip some darker value, a bit of a darker shadow on that. If we're looking at it on our left-hand side, if you're looking at it on the screen, but on her right-hand side, and there's a bit of a darker shadow smudged through there. If you really paid attention to it, you'd be going, there's not a neck there. It's just the illusion. I love doing abstract painting for that. I love people who go, oh, that's so great. And then they walk up and go, no, it's just smudges of paint. This is incredible. I do a few changes on this hand, by the way. He actually put his one finger over the top because he wanted to indicate oneness. I would normally have rubbed it out. That's me. But the client is the client, and he wanted that. He wanted to show that he was at one. That was his idea with his daughter. So it's like, guess what? It's staying. If that's what you want, that's what you get. And I play around with his hand. It was quite an awkward position he put it in. And, I'm looking at the painting, obviously, and I'm looking at the hand, and I'm not happy with it because it's not coming across right here. And you'll see me cut in and do all sorts of stuff. I'm trying... It just the angle he had it, and then and this is where we have to have artistic license. I know what he wants from that main finger. I know what he wants there, but he had the other finger just half crooked over, and this is where photograph. When you now look at it, you're kind of going, that doesn't work. I'm sure you're looking at this painting now and going, that hand is not working. And then you say, well, we've got to leave that main finger in because that's what the client wants. But we'll come back to that once I've covered the canvas a little bit more. I want the canvas covered so that my brain can actually have a look at it properly. Here I'm just doing a bit of ultramarine blue. Burnt umber is in there. I think I put a little bit of pyrorubin in there as well. Just to give this greyish texture in here. I wasn't going to put any red into the main blacks, but in here I just put a little dab, and then of course titanium white. And now I'm just going to form the curves of the jacket. And again, where I want the longer sweeps, I'll put them in, and where I want the shorter ones, I'll use a little jabby stroke on there. And again, now I've actually switched to a finer brush, and now I'm back up. And you'll see I'm using this is a number 4 fill, but this one. And this is how I'm going to start to imitate movement in the jacket. See those little short strokes I do? Now, I think this is important that you're not, when we're artists, we're not painting, we do fine cuttings like this, obviously. But when we're trying to get to the main area, we're not doing color by numbers. We're not just trying to block it in. And this is what's going to give me the texture on this jacket. by doing short, stabby strokes, by pushing and pulling, I'm going to leave texture on the surface. Now, I'm not always successful in this, guys. Not always successful, but it's something constant in my mind. And I'm looking at the direction of the jacket now. I'm looking at the connection and going, okay, so the jacket is swooping here. I'm going to move the brush in that direction. And you'll see again, I push those bristles and let them spring back up, pulling the paint from that linen canvas, and I'm moving them in the direction that I want the jacket to move in. And I think that's the important part here. That's what I'm doing. I'm moving in that direction. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you've subscribed and liked. And this is my very first video, so it's going to be really interesting to see what you guys think. Write some comments, what you think of how I actually painted the portrait as a still life rather than a traditional portrait painting method. That's going to be interesting what you guys actually think of doing it in that way. What you think of me painting these jackets, how do you paint? What are you looking for? I'd love to hear from you. Any comments or things about this painting. This one is it's quite a long process, as you know, as we paint portraits. So I'm actually just going to complete her today for you. We'll get this jacket finished so you can actually see the whole process of finishing the jacket. And then from there, next week, I will actually edit up and you can see me paint Dad. And then you'll be able to see the two of them together. And then you'll be able to see me go back and make my final adjustments here and there. Already I'm looking and I'm watching and going, even this close scene, it's tempting to go in on that, on the cheeks and make some adjustments. I just refuse to. I just absolutely just go, no, the canvas is not covered yet. There is no going back and fixing. Now, this is a zipper. Now, I'm changing values as I come down the zipper. I've actually just got some titanium white, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber in a very light mix. I'm just going to dab in. I'm not trying to paint a zipper, by the way, but it is a zipper. I'm just going to put some little dots. They don't even have to be evenly spaced. It doesn't matter. And every time I go to my canvas, I'm loading the brush with a different value. This is important. And then I've just come all. I didn't want to bore you, so I've just come all the way down. But if you look carefully, you'll see, he's put different values in there. He's put lights and darks, and this is exactly the same on the other side. I won't paint the whole zipper in the same value, so I've got about 4 values sitting on the palette that I'm copying. Now this is the jumper. And again, you're not trying to paint fabric. Oh, you can see the linen moving there, where it's not properly stuck down, but that's okay. That movement, you don't have to get too fussy. If there is a movement in your linen, it's not properly done, but you're getting the coverage, the movement will just add the texture to your brushstrokes. And when you realize that it's a texture that will cause your paintings to be grippy for people's eyes, so they're going to spend a bit longer looking and find it attractive to look at because it's interesting. The eyes are having to work, and if you can make the eyes work on your portrait, it's quite magical. That's what will retain them looking at it and finding interesting things throughout that portrait look at. So we're having a look at the jumper. We know there's some movement. I'm looking at her movement. She's twisted her body here. So there's going to be some twists in that jumper. You twist your own body, and you can do that yourself and go, oh, yeah, my jumper doesn't sit perfectly flat. It's not straight up and down. It's got some creases, got some curves in it. And again, now we're just mixing up and this will be this is ultramarine blue with the titanium white, a little bit of burnt umber just to desaturate the blue, and then a little bit of my bismuth yellow. So I put a bit of yellow into this. May not show through properly on the camera, but that yellow is just adding something to the blue. It's shifting it over. As we know, blue and yellow obviously make green. I don't want green, but I do want it shifted. I do want the light and the color to shift over to that. So that's what I've done. And if you had to look at the shadows, you'd probably go, oh yeah, I could see it more when you painted those shadow lines. I could really see the green in them coming through. When it's painted amazingly, it's just going to look like a grey blue jumper to most people. But you're eyes are like magic. Your eyes can see more than we can give them credit for. And you see, I just know that where that jacket collar is, there has to be a shadow. Even though I can't see it in the photograph, I know there has to be a shadow being cast somewhere around there. So I'm going to have to put something in there that'll give me that. And as you see, I've just built this up. I've just filled the canvas. Now I'm just going back in and just putting a couple of little highlights on that neck collar, just so their eyes have got something to look at there. I've got another little bit of shadow line that I wanted to form. And really, this part of the portrait is just about done. See just that movement, those collars that they've got on those jumpers. So that's why the brush moves in that direction. You'll see I'm just wiping the palette. Now I'm going to just start from the bottom here. I'm actually just putting some shadows on this other side that I've moved the camera for you so you can actually see what I'm doing. And this is just the last piece of her black leather jacket without having to try and paint black leather. Now, it doesn't look the best at the moment either because we haven't got the red jacket to contrast against it. So it was wonderful that they wore, contrasting jackets. We'd had a talk about this. That's what I like to do with clients, have a talk about what they're actually going to do. And having the red and the black really did work. And all I'm doing now, I'm actually cutting around Dad's jacket there, and that's where that's going to cut in. And we'll look at that next week. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me. This video is just about coming to an end. You'll see I've just put these final brush strokes. Again, I'm not rushing anything. I'm deliberately changing values, very subtle shifts in values. I'm moving that, twisting and winding that brush and pressing the bristles in and pulling them out and doing all that sort of fun stuff. That's all part of being an artist, isn't it? Really enjoying it. And there you go, guys. That's what the final painting looks like for her half. And next week, we'll come back and do the other half. Well, thanks for joining me on that very first painting I've done on YouTube. It's a little bit different painting and when you're being filmed, but hey, all good stuff. I hope you really enjoyed it, guys. Look, a like, share, do all the usual stuff. Subscribe to the channel, please. It really will help me grow this, and I want to bring you more and more content. As I said, next week we're going to paint the father side of this painting. I'll bring you even more. Put your comments down, ask me questions, tell me something you'd like me to see me paint or something you'd like to see done on the channel that will help you. Maybe you want some more business advice, maybe you want some more painting techniques advice. Doesn't matter. Let's all share, let's grow together, and I'll see you next week.